Hi, this is Todd, and welcome to the Thrive Singles Podcast. Whether you're single again or still single, stop hating being single and learn to thrive. And welcome to this week's edition of the Thrive Singles Podcast. I'm going to go negative again this week. Last week I did the top 10 ways to be unattractive. Today's topic is the bad advice people give singles. When I found myself single again at 40, I received a lot of awesome advice. Some of it saved me a lot of heartache. But I don't want to talk about that today. Today, let's talk about some of the worst bad advice people give singles. What? Too much negativity? Okay, tell you what. I'll throw in some good advice too, all right? Okay, first bad advice. Get right back on that horse. Actually, this is great advice if you're training for a rodeo. But if you've just been through a divorce or breakup, it's terrible advice. Some of the most heartbreaking stories I hear come from people who get right back on that dating horse too soon after a breakup. Rebound relationships are the worst. Two people get together, they feel they have so much in common. In reality, mostly what they have in common is the pain they feel from their recent breakups. They help each other feel better and forget about the pain, but the pain's always there, just below the surface, undealt with and unhealed. Once they date a while, eventually they discover they have little to nothing else in common. Then they break up, and they deal with that pain, plus the pain from the last breakup that they never dealt with. Then they have a choice. Deal with this even greater compounded pain, or numb the pain with yet another rebound relationship. Many choose what they believe is the easier route and go for another rebound, and this cycle can repeat indefinitely. Better advice? Take time to heal. Healing takes time. Take a break from dating. A good, long break. If you broke a leg, nobody would tell you, get right back on that leg. Give your heart time to heal up. There will be a time in the future, at an appropriate point in your healing, when you do need to get back on that horse. But that time comes later. Don't rush it. Which leads us to our next bad advice. Time heals all wounds. Now, it is true, it does take a lot of time to heal wounds, but the mere passing of time heals nothing. This advice insists that if you wait long enough, your heart will magically heal itself. Does that work for physical wounds? I mean, it might sometimes for a minor wound, but we're talking about a broken heart. We're talking about a major wound. For a severe wound, you'd never just give it time to heal. It would take time, but the wound would also need to be properly taken care of. You may need something as simple as some antibiotic ointment and a bandage, but you may need that wound cauterized. You may need it stitched up. Then it might take months of special protection and special care. So, better advice? Proper care over time heals wounds. If your heart has been broken, that's a severe wound. It will require special, long-term care. You'll need to do things that allow it to heal properly. Keep it out of harm's way for a while. Don't expose it to unknown, potentially damaging people. Strengthen it by feeding your mind and spirit a diet of positive, uplifting things. And apply the healing balm of love of trusted friends and family liberally. Bad advice. You're too picky. Anyone who's ever been single for any amount of time has heard this one. The assumption is, if you're still single, it has to be that your standards are too high. If you just lower your standards and expectations, you could be married. There are a number of problems with this. How low should one lower their standards? How picky is too picky? Who gets to decide how picky is too picky? Is it wise to forsake your standards just to not be alone? Will lower standards lead to a happier marriage? You may or may not be too picky. The thing is, What is it important to be picky about, and what should you not be so picky about? So here's the better advice. Decide what's important and make a list. The best person to define your standards and your expectations is you. That doesn't mean you shouldn't get input from people you trust. You should seek out advice from trusted friends and family who have strong, long-term marriages of their own. But in the end, you decide what is and is not important to you. Of course, some things are naturally more important than others. Your standards for morals and character, for instance, should never be lowered. On the other hand, some things are just not that important in the grand scheme of things. So ask yourself, what is important to you and why? Then make a list of 5 to 10 things that you must have in a mate, and 5 to 10 things that are deal breakers. Talk it over with a few trusted advisors. Then once you have a good and reasonable list, stick to it. All right, bad advice. They're all alike. Sometimes this advice comes from well-meaning friends. Sometimes it comes from within ourselves. That thought that all men, women, white people, blondes, Latinos, whatevers are alike. And this is patently not true. In fact, have you ever met two people who are actually identical? And yet I know people who have sworn to never trust a particular body type, hair color, race, religion, or whatever again because of their ex. This is especially bad advice when it comes to gender, race, ethnicity. How do you possibly know that all whatevers are exactly alike? Are you exactly like everyone of your race, religion, gender, hair color? Of course not. That's just silly. Here's the better advice. Let each person prove himself or herself to you. Let each individual prove to you whether they're like your ex or not. Don't make assumptions. Looking like your ex doesn't mean they have a character flaw that your ex had. And likewise, looking different from your ex is no guarantee that they're trustworthy. Let each person prove himself or herself to you over time. It goes back to time again. It takes time for people to show who they really are. So let's sum it up. Bad advice. Get right back on that horse. Time heals all wounds. You're too picky. They're all alike. Dumb advice. Here's the better advice. Healing takes time. Proper care over time heals wounds. Decide what's important in a spouse and make a list. Let each person prove himself or herself to you over time. How about you? What's the worst advice you've ever gotten? Or what's the worst advice you've ever heard somebody give another single? And what's the best advice you've ever received? I'd love to know. In fact, I'll use some of the best and some of the most common ones in an upcoming podcast. I hope you enjoyed this week's podcast. See you next week. Till then, be sure to subscribe and go check out my extensive archive of past posts at thrivesingles.com. And thrive on.
Whoa, thrive. Yeah, come alive. There's more to life. You gotta grow, you gotta thrive. Whoa, whoa, you gotta thrive. There's more to life than to just survive.